Good morning. My name is Eli Howes. Can you please tell me your full name?
Hi, good morning. My name is Clara and Gelly.
Okay, and what should I call you?
Clara is fine, thanks.
Okay, Clara, in this first part, I'd like to ask you some questions about yourself. Let's talk about what you do. Do you work or are you a student?
So I'm technically a student here because I've started a PhD back in September, but the day-to-day is a bit more similar to what someone would do if they were working full-time. So both.
Okay, and why did you choose to do this PhD?
Great question. I guess ever since my brother got his PhD when I was around 10, I've told him that I'd get something even higher than what he has, and he told me it was impossible. So that already set me up to think about doing a PhD to be at least as educated as him, I guess.
Hmm.
And then it really, when I started doing my master's thesis, that I kind of discovered the world of academic research, and it actually seemed very appropriate for me because I'm a very naturally curious person. And I really fell in love with the topic that I was studying at the time.
Yeah, thank
So,
you.
yeah.
We're going to move on. Let's talk about teamwork. Do you like to work as part of a team?
Yeah, I think teamwork is great. It's very important in my field of research, especially now that I think academic research is leaning towards a more interdisciplinary dynamic. So it's super important to have different professionals in your group who all do different things, so you can have a very wide angle for any question that you come onto.
And what do you think are the benefits of working alone?
Sometimes you just need to get stuff done. I think working from home, for example, is a great way of being efficient and productive without having these pesky questions coming from people every now and then. So I would say there's benefits in both for sure.
Is there anything you don't like about working as a team?
Mm, I guess sometimes it can be difficult to resolve differences and point of views. There can be conflict arising, especially if two members of the team do not get along. And this can be especially challenging when it comes to conflict resolution, or when two people have differing opinions that can't, where one isn't necessarily right or wrong, but you have to choose.
Let's move on. Let's talk about free time. What do you like to do in your free time?
In my free time, I love to climb. I've been climbing for a few years now. I do both rope climbing and bouldering. I also really love to knit and crochet. I've also been learning this for a few years now. I'm making my own sweaters sometimes. And another thing that I really like is just meeting up with friends.
Yes. And how much time do you have each week for doing these activities?
Um, well, in relation to my work, it depends from the week to week. I do have weeks that are very busy and others that are less. So whatever free time I have after work is usually going towards these activities, as well as the weekend and any holiday that I can take.
Mm. And how did you start doing all of these free time activities?
Climbing, I started when I was 7. My parents thought it was a fun thing for a kid to do, so I started going to classes when I was younger. I then sort of stopped and then took it up again during COVID and the pandemic. Knitting and crocheting. My mom actually taught me crochet 3 years ago because I've asked her to. And it kind of naturally led me to learn knitting, which I did on my own. And meeting up with friends, I guess you don't need to learn how to do that. I just, being human.
Yes.
Yeah. The topic was about a special photo that I have. And I immediately thought of a photo that I actually keep in my nightstand at all time, which is of my nanny and I, which was taken when I was just after I was born in the maternity ward at the hospital. It's a picture of her holding me in her arms. I look all pink because I was just born, and I have very little hair, obviously, as all newborns do. And it's very special to me because she is someone who took care of me a lot when I was younger. My parents were both very busy with work. My mom actually started studying right after I was born, maybe 6 months after. And so I spent the majority of my time at her place. And after I was a bit more grown, she would pick me up and take me to her home after school and also come to my house and take care of me. And to this day, I visit her every time I go home. I have a very strong bond with her. I think she's great. She's kind of my second mom, to be honest. And I'll obviously keep this photo for as long as I can. I was using it as a bookmark at some point, but now I'm kind of scared that I'll lose it if I keep doing that. So I think I'm going to stop. And yeah, I think it's got a great place in my nightstand. I maybe I should take a frame for it, a special frame. And I hope that she has that photo as well. Actually, I'm not sure if she ever even knows that it exists. Maybe I should make a copy and give it to her. But yeah, in the future, I hope to take many more photos with her, to be honest. Every time I visit her. Yes,
Thank
okay,
you.
good.
And do you think you will have more photo opportunities with her in the future?
Yeah, for sure. Every time I go back home, or at least every other time, I go visit her. I tell her about what I'm up to, and when I can, I try to bring some knitting projects with her because she also actually did teach me how to knit when I was 6 or 7, but I completely forgot after that.
Okay, so we've been talking about a special photo for you, and I'd like to discuss with you one or two more general questions related to this. Let's consider, first of all, um, photography. Now, do you think being a photographer would be an interesting job?
Yeah, I think it'd be very interesting. The third thing that comes to mind is that you can get lucky and be a photographer of very beautiful landscapes, and that leads you to travel the world. Obviously, that's not a job that's easy to come by, but if I were to be a photographer, I think I would go that route and go to beautiful places and just snap beautiful pictures of whatever I encounter.
Yes. And do you think it can also be a challenging job?
I think it can be challenging to live from it for sure. I do have friends who either tried to become photographers full time or who are, and it's a grind for sure. You need to put in a lot of effort to become established in the fields. It's a lot of, yeah, it's about who you know. You need to establish contacts and networks. And I think that can be one of the most difficult parts, to be honest.
And some people say that nowadays, with technologically advanced smartphones, anyone can take a good photo, and therefore it's not as valuable a profession as it used to be. What do you think about that?
Um, I don't think that's necessarily true. I think anytime a medium becomes quite easily accessible, the first reaction is that we tend to think that it devalues it, which I think is the wrong way to look at it. For example, there's many feature-length movies that have been filmed with iPhone cameras recently. Some of them even have won prizes. At festivals, yeah, not everyone is shooting feature-length films in the backyards. I think it still takes a lot of effort, creativity, and talent to do these things, even if you have an iPhone with you.
Yes. Well, let's move on and let's talk a little about movies and films. Um, some countries ban movies and films from being shown domestically in their country. For example, maybe they have political themes or a message that the government or authorities don't feel comfortable with. What do you think about that?
I think this is a tricky topic, to be honest. Um, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is countries which are ruled by religious governments, where some form of arts and some of what is depicted in this art is seen as going against the religion. I can't say I'm in favor of it, but I also think it's such a difficult topic that it would be tricky for me to establish my full point of view in 1 minute.
Well, that's
However,
very true.
yeah, however, I mean, I will say that I think it's good to such a complicated question, to be honest.
Sure. I mean,
I
sometimes
think
it
it's not
feels
great. I will say that.
Sometimes it feels easier. I mean, because a lot of books also get banned, right? And sometimes when we think about books that have been banned throughout history, somehow it seems more acceptable that those books are banned. Or maybe it doesn't. I mean, what do you think about that?
Mm, I think anything which promotes hate or violence should probably be banned. I think you do have grounds for that when it comes to promoting harmful behavior. But then again, the line to draw is it's a pretty blurry line,
Mm.
because what might seem to some people as hateful speech might not be and could be weaponized politically as well.
Totally. So do you think when it comes to working out what should and shouldn't be allowed to be shown to the masses, do you think that that responsibility should fall onto the government, or should it be more kind of independent bodies that make such a decision?
I mean, I think as everything in politics, it's important to have counterweights. So the government should legislate on these matters, but there should be built-in bodies which are independent from these entities in the government, which should then be able to counterweight these decisions if there was a need to do so.
Okay, thank you very much. That is the end of the speaking test. Wow, great speaking test. So that's, you said you were curious of what score you would get. That's a solid band nine, Clara.
Oh,
Congratulations.
cool.
Yeah. And I was thinking towards the end, I was like, I wonder, because we know each other. We've spoken lots in
Mhm.
English before. So, I was curious to see what score you'd get. And I was wondering whether at the end you might think that you wouldn't be getting a top score because the questions got quite tricky.
They did. I didn't expect to have to elaborate on such a tricky topic, to be honest.
Sure, sure. So that typically happens in the exam if the examiner realizes that you're at a very high level of English. Like they're kind of trained in how to ask slightly more difficult abstract questions. And so I just decided to go for the super difficult, super abstract, super kind of gray area questions for your part three because, it's so clear that you're a clear, logical thinker and you've got the language ability to express those thoughts.
Nice. I
Mm.
thought I would get minuses for my pronunciation, but I'm glad that wasn't the case.
Yeah, why do you think that?
I'm a mumbler even in my native language. I just am. When I go home, some of my extended family needs a few days to adjust to the way I speak. My parents often will ask me to repeat things, and when we've spoken before, you have asked me to repeat things at certain points. So I just thought
Uh-huh.
I need to really put an effort into vocalizing things really clearly today.
Well, I mean, I understood every word that you said, and your pronunciation made a lot of sense at word level, but also at sentence level. Sometimes you spoke quickly, sometimes you spoke slowly, sometimes your intonation went up, sometimes your intonation went down, and it was all very logical depending on the message that you were trying to communicate. So, yeah, I would be giving you band nine, which is the top mark for pronunciation, as well as all the others. And I'll quickly go through some of the notes that I took about your performance today. So you're assessed on four criteria. Pronunciation is the last one, so we'll get to that last. The first one is fluency and coherence. So this is your ability to talk about topics without too much hesitation or repetition. And you did really well with fluency and coherence. You've got a lot of good linking words, things like, oh, great question. Typically, lower level students would say something like, that's a great question. And it sounds a bit kind of stinted, but you'd be like, oh, great question. Or you'd say things like, well, in relation to my work. And you were very good at storytelling, whether it was part one or part two or part three. You were really able to build in these stories, and naturally, stories have a kind of logical coherence because it moves from one thing to another. So that was all great. When I asked you more tricky questions, you had like good ways to introduce those tricky answers. Like, well, the first thing that comes to my mind is, however, I'd say that, or it might seem this way to some people, or it's difficult to establish my opinion in 1 minute. So these are all very clever ways, and you're not doing this consciously because you're not really actually being like, I need to get my band nine IELTS. You're just smart and a very good English speaker. But this is the stuff that people watching this video can learn from you. Unless maybe, did you do that kind of stuff intentionally?
No, I think all of that just comes from, to be honest, being in academia for a while. I mean, having to use these words is important when you're writing, when you're speaking. They're just, yeah, I guess I'm used to talking about ideas because of my job.
Makes a lot of sense. So you're rather than like preparing for like the exam, it's like you've used all the skills that help you in this exam, but in real life.
Yeah, I guess it's pretty lucky.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of the dream, to be honest. I think it's probably almost the best way to prepare for an exam like this is actually have to use these skills, not just for some weird IELTS exam, but actually in your day-to-day life. So yeah,
Hmm.
so amazing for fluency and coherence. There was a little bit of repetition of and in part two. So for your long term, when you were talking about this photograph, you
Hmm.
would often end with and that would allow you to bring in the next idea. So that would be like one small criticism, but that doesn't stop you from getting the top mark. So the next one is Lexis. It's called lexical resource, and it's your vocabulary. And yeah, so many good chunks of language, like naturally curious person in my field of research, leaning towards conflict arising. If two members of the team don't get along is a great idiomatic phrase. Conflict resolution, taking up climbing. You didn't just start climbing, you took up climbing. You're showing an awareness of more sophisticated vocabulary to describe how you feel. It's things like it's a grind, weaponized, government entities, all great. So yeah, so a very clear band nine for your lexical resource. And then you've got grammatical range and accuracy. So your range is very high. You're using a lot of complex grammar, a lot of conditional structures, and your accuracy is very good. There was one point where you said I've started 3 years ago. And if you say 3 years ago, then it makes more sense to use the past simple. So I
I
started.
started.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're
But
right.
again, that's the kind of mistake that a native speaker would make. And typically, actually, you would even hear that in the US quite regularly. So, I can't possibly lower your score for that, even as a Brit. You also said like a photo of my nanny and I, or Nana, I think it, yeah.
As I said it, I was like, I remember actually you and Henry having a discussion about this, and I was like, oh, it's gonna be me and not I.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Well,
one
it
of these
is
tricky
actually in
ones
that
that
case.
doesn't sound good, but it's actually the other way around. Yeah.
Sure. And the reason probably Henry and I were having that discussion was maybe because I made the exact same mistake at some point. So, it's again
Yeah.
a native speaker mistake. You're still getting your band nine.
Mm.
And then again, we talked about pronunciation already. Very clear to understand you. Great pronunciation at sentence and word level as well. So how we've only got a couple of minutes left, but how did you get to such a high level of English?
By studying in the UK, I mean, I had to take a language test myself now almost 10 years ago, but I didn't take the IELTS. I took the TOEFL. I took the TOEFL. Um, I guess when I was younger, I just watched a lot of American TV shows, which you might actually be able to hear it in the way that I speak. I first started watching them with French subtitles because I'm French, and then little by little, kind of realized that I was able to understand everything with English subtitles. Um, and so that kind of gave me, I think, a bit of a head start compared to other people in my English class, even though I was really, really bad at English at first. Like, I had bad grades. My teacher was like telling my parents that they need to do something about it. And then, yeah, I guess I was just a massive nerd and just watched a lot of things. And then I ended up just going with a lot of blind confidence to a British university because I just thought that because my level was superior to the people around me, I must be just really good at English. And then I got there and it was a really harsh wake up call. And
Right.
I
So what was it
couldn't
like
follow
in the
my
first
lectures.
year?
Yeah, I couldn't. And I mean, I had a friend help me taking notes and stuff because I was studying philosophy, which is also, I think, a topic where you definitely need to have good English proficiency. And so one of my friends was helping me taking my notes for the first year. And then it was very difficult in social situations where there was lots of people speaking at once in pubs and stuff.
Hmm.
But I don't know, eventually you just kind of forced to, right? It's the best way to learn the language, just to immerse yourself. And I've lived in English speaking countries ever since, up until this year when I've moved to Spain. But I'm still in an English speaking working environment. So that's how I got to it.
Mm.
And it helped that, I mean, helped. People were making fun of my accent constantly because I had a very thick French accent, and people were making fun of me being French a lot. And so I just tried as best as I could to lose my French accent because I hated people being able to tell immediately where I came from when I opened my mouth because it would give rise to so many jokes about my nationality. So yeah, that also helped.
Right. I love that it's almost like, when people talk about motivation, they talk about like the carrot and the stick. And I like the way that, you've had like the carrot experience and the stick. So like the carrot was like, I want to study abroad and I'm motivated. I want to understand all these television shows. But then you also kind of gave yourself the stick a little bit. Like you forced yourself because you didn't want to be teased and you didn't want to
Yeah,
be, like the butt of a joke about being French or whatever.
yeah, exactly. I wanted people to stop using the word baguette around me and ha 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 and stop saying that I'm a friend. What did they say again? A cheese eating, surrendering monkey.
Wow.
Have you ever heard that one?
I've never heard that, but like,
Well, there you go.
yeah, yeah. I guess, I probably don't have like the kind of same kind of sophisticated way of teasing people as some
Yeah.
philosophers down in the UK. So, hmm.
He was not a philosopher. He was just a guy from Carlisle.
Oh, okay. Just, yeah, who ends up being one of your main motivations for getting an incredibly good, clear accent in English.
Yeah, exactly.
Clara, thank you so much for coming on and doing the speaking test. It's going to be so useful for everybody to, learn from such a great example of somebody who speaks naturally, confidently, and clearly at such a high level. So thank you.
Cool. Thanks. Thanks for having me.